Skylar Voss didn't mind the sight of blood, she'd spilled plenty in her line of work. But watching her own drip down her arm onto the cracked floor of a grimy spaceport was a different story. The mercenary life paid well, but it didn't exactly come with a health plan. She pressed her hand against the gash in her side, muttering curses under her breath. The worst part wasn't the bleeding. It was the fact that her own employer had just tried to kill her. Moments earlier, she'd been making her way back from a high-stakes mission, a clean job, or so she thought. Sneak into a gang hideout, steal a priceless artifact, and collect her paycheck. The Nexus key was now strapped securely to her belt, but the payment? That was looking a lot less likely. When Varenholt's goons showed up, guns blazing, Skylar realized she'd been set up from the start. Skylar ducked into a storage unit, jamming the metal door shut behind her. Footsteps pounded past outside, her pursuers shouting orders. She slid to the floor and let out a breath. A metallic voice crackled through her comms. Varenholt himself. "You were never supposed to make it out alive," he sneered. "Thanks for delivering the key, though. Enjoy your last breath." The transmission cut off. Skylar gritted her teeth. "Charming," she muttered. The storage unit door groaned violently, the outer bolts buckling. Skylar snatched a flash grenade from her belt, waited until the metal frame crumpled inward, and tossed it through the gap. The explosion sent her attackers stumbling back. She bolted, weaving between crates as laser bolts sizzled past her. Her fingers flew across her comms panel. "Rex!" She barked into her earpiece, calling her usual contact. "I need an evac now!" "No can do," Rex's panicked voice shot back. "Varen's put a bounty on you. Every lowlife in the sector's out for your head. You're on your own." Of course she was. Skylar clenched her fists, sprinting deeper into the maze of loading docks. The pounding footsteps closed in fast. She skidded into a narrow corridor, only to find a steel door locked tight at the end. Turning back wasn't an option. Her hunters were already closing in. "Figures," she muttered, bracing for a fight. That's when she heard the voice. Low and calm, it seemed to come from nowhere. "Step aside." A shadow blurred past her. Before Skylar could react, the figure struck, a blade flashing faster than her eyes could follow. In seconds, her attackers lay sprawled on the floor, motionless. The hooded figure turned, stepping into the dim light. The face was concealed beneath a mask, sleek, metallic, and sculpted like a skull. The figure's voice was cold and steady. "You're welcome." Skylar reached for her pistol. "Yeah? And who the hell are you?" "I'm the one who just saved your life," the masked figure said. "The Reaper." Skylar had heard the name before. Rumors whispered across black market channels about a rogue assassin, one who left no survivors and worked only for causes no one could explain. The kind of person you didn't want to meet in a dark alley. And here they were. "Lucky me," she muttered. "What's your angle?" "You're carrying something dangerous," the Reaper said, eyes narrowing toward the artifact on her belt. "The Nexus key. It's more than just a trinket. If Varenholt gets his hands on it, thousands will die." Skylar snorted. "Sounds like Holt's problem. I just want my payday." The Reaper's masked face didn't move, but his voice hardened. "There won't be anyone left to pay you if he succeeds." Skylar paused, weighing her options. She wasn't the type to play hero. She took jobs for money, not morals. But something about the Reaper's warning rattled her. "I work alone," she said finally. "Not tonight," the Reaper replied. "Not if you want to live." With a sigh, Skylar unclipped the Nexus key from her belt and held it up. The small, glowing device pulsed faintly in her palm. The Reaper's gaze locked onto it. "What's so dangerous about this thing?" Skylar asked. The Reaper hesitated, as if deciding how much to tell her. "It's not just a navigation tool," he said. "It's a control device, a key to manipulating entire planetary systems. Holt plans to use it to destabilize trade routes across the Outer Rim. If he pulls it off, entire colonies will fall into chaos." Starvation, riots, billions will pay the price. Skylar frowned. Why would a corporation go that far? Power, the Reaper said grimly. Control the chaos, control the profits. Skylar had seen plenty of ruthless employers in her time, but this was next level. I should have charged him triple, she muttered. Moments later, they moved through the shadowed alleys of the spaceport, navigating the back routes to avoid patrols. Skylar knew Holt wouldn't give up easily. Sure enough, within minutes, a squad of heavily armed mercenaries appeared at the far end of the street, spreading out to block their escape. Fantastic, Skylar muttered, drawing her pistol. Don't waste your ammo, the Reaper advised. I have a plan. Oh great, she shot back. Another mysterious guy with a plan. What could go wrong? The Reaper grabbed her arm and dragged her toward a cargo ship preparing to launch. He barked something in a language Skylar didn't recognize, and the ship's side hatch hissed open. Skylar shot him a suspicious look. You had this lined up the whole time? Call it foresight, the Reaper replied. Get in. Skylar followed, but as the doors slid shut behind them, she knew this wasn't over. Holt would come after them, and she still didn't trust the stranger beside her. You better not be leading me into a death trap, she warned. If I were, the Reaper said coolly, you'd already be dead. Skylar leaned back against the cold metal wall of the ship, staring at the Nexus key in her palm. Maybe she should have taken an easier job, smuggling illegal cargo, stealing from spoiled aristocrats, anything other than this suicidal mess. But as the ship roared into the sky and the spaceport lights faded beneath them, she knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about money anymore. Holt had crossed her, and Skylar Voss didn't let that slide. You're right, she said quietly to the Reaper. This isn't over. The Reaper's masked face turned toward her. No, he said. It's just beginning. Skylar Voss didn't like working with partners. Partners got in the way. They had opinions, made mistakes, or worse, they tried to take credit. Yet here she was, jammed into a dimly lit cargo hold beside a masked vigilante who apparently called himself the Reaper. The ship lurched violently as it jumped to hyperspace, sending Skylar stumbling against a stack of storage crates. She shot a glare at the Reaper, who sat calmly on a metal bench, seemingly unaffected by the turbulence. Is this bucket of bolts even space-worthy? Skylar muttered, pressing her fingers against her bruised ribs. It's off the radar, the Reaper answered without looking at her. That's all that matters right now. Yeah? Skylar scoffed. Because I've got a dozen bounty hunters who'd say otherwise. The Reaper finally turned his head, his cold, featureless mask reflecting the dim cabin lights. Your lucky bounty hunters are your biggest problem right now. Skylar hated cryptic remarks. She rubbed her temples and focused on the real question that had been bugging her since they'd boarded. Look, she said. I know Holt's a power-hungry lunatic, but you're telling me he's about to burn entire colonies to the ground for profit? Seems like a lot of effort when there's easier ways to make a fortune. The Reaper shifted slightly, as though debating how much to say. It's not just profit, he said at last. Holt's using the Nexus key to manipulate space routes. Ships will get stranded. Some will collide with asteroid belts, others will drift until their crews die of starvation or oxygen failure. Those territories will go dark, and when they do, Nebula Corps will send in their rescue teams, heavily armed mercenaries disguised as peacekeepers. They'll offer protection for a price. Skylar shook her head. That's insane. That's corporate strategy, the Reaper replied. Skylar didn't doubt it. She'd worked enough dirty jobs to know that corruption ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. Even so, there was something about the Reaper's voice, a sharpness that cut deeper than simple hatred. It wasn't just anger. It was personal. You've got history with him, Skylar said carefully. For a moment, the Reaper said nothing. Then, quietly, he spoke. I used to work for Nebula Corps. Scientist. Engineer. I helped design the Nexus key. Skylar blinked, caught off guard. You built the damn thing? Parts of it, he admitted. It was supposed to revolutionize space navigation, stabilize wormholes, streamline trade routes. But once Holt got wind of its potential, he twisted it into something else. I tried to stop him. That's when things changed. Skylar leaned forward slightly. Changed how? The Reaper's hand curled into a fist on his knee. He killed my sister. The cold finality in his tone left no room for questions. Skylar felt her usual sarcasm slipping away. She knew grief when she saw it, that raw, gnawing emptiness that never really left you. So now you're hunting him, she said quietly. I'm making sure no one else ends up like her, the Reaper said. Skylar sat back, running her thumb across the Nexus key still strapped to her belt. It seemed too small, too insignificant to be at the heart of all this. But if the Reaper was telling the truth, she understood why Holt wanted it so badly. So what's the plan? She asked. We break into Nebula Corps' main headquarters, the Reaper answered. Destroy every trace of the Nexus schematics before Holt can rebuild it. Skylar snorted. That's not a plan. That's a suicide note. It's the only way. Yeah? Skylar shot back. And what's stopping Holt from just rebuilding it later? The Reaper reached into his coat and pulled out a data chip. This, he said. Blueprints for a virus that will corrupt every backup of the Nexus key stored on Nebula Corps' network. If we upload it to their servers, there won't be anything left to rebuild. Skylar took the chip, turning it between her fingers. You're sure this will work? It has to. Later that night, Skylar found herself perched on a rooftop overlooking Nebula Corps' central headquarters. The towering structure pulsed with neon lights and security drones circled the perimeter like vultures. The Reaper knelt beside her, adjusting a compact rifle designed to fire electromagnetic pulses. We'll move fast, he said. Disable the security grid, access the main server room, and upload the virus. We'll have 10 minutes at most before reinforcements arrive. You always this optimistic? Skylar muttered. He didn't answer. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The mission began smoothly enough. The Reaper disabled the outer security grid with precision that almost impressed Skylar. Almost. They slipped through a side entrance and moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors. Skylar took the lead, silencing guards with her blade while the Reaper hacked door controls and scrambled security feeds. It was too easy, and Skylar knew better than to trust easy. They reached the server room without resistance, and the Reaper immediately plugged the virus into the network console. Data streams danced across the display, scrolling faster than Skylar could follow. We're in, the Reaper said. Another 30 seconds and... The alarm screamed to life. Figures, Skylar muttered, drawing her pistol. How bad are we talking? The Reaper's fingers flew across the console. They're locking down the building. We need to finish the upload before. A deafening blast rocked the hallway outside. Skylar spun to see a group of heavily armed Nebula Corps guards pouring in, rifles trained on them. Looks like we're out of time, she said. The Reaper hit one final command on the console. The virus is uploading. We just need to hold them off. Skylar ducked behind a steel table as the guards opened fire. Energy blasts scorched the walls as she returned fire, nailing one attacker in the shoulder. The Reaper hurled a smoke grenade, clouding the room in thick fog. We need an exit, Skylar shouted. The Reaper pointed to a vent above the console. Up there! Skylar cursed under her breath. Of course it's a vent. Together, they climbed into the narrow passage just as the guards burst into the room. The sound of gunfire echoed behind them, but Skylar kept crawling. When they finally emerged on the outer catwalk, she drew in a shaky breath of cold air. You sure that virus worked? She asked. It worked, the Reaper said. Holt's plans are finished. Skylar should have felt relieved, but something still nagged at her. So what happens now? She asked. The Reaper's voice was quieter than usual. Now Holt makes this personal. Skylar wasn't sure if that scared her more or less. Holt had already proven he'd kill anyone who got in his way. She knew that whatever came next wasn't going to be clean, easy or quiet. Great, she muttered. Can't wait. The bounty hunters came at dawn. Skylar Voss had barely managed 2 hours of sleep before the first explosion rocked the walls of her safe house. The reinforced windows vibrated as a second blast thundered from outside. Smoke curled through the cracks, and the distant shouts of approaching mercenaries echoed in the alleyway. She shot upright, dragging her pistol from beneath her pillow. Up! She barked, already on her feet. The Reaper was already awake, standing in the shadowed corner of the room like a statue. His mask caught the dim morning light, its skeletal face as cold and impassive as ever. He held his blade in one hand, his compact pulse rifle in the other. They found us, Skylar growled. They were always going to, the Reaper replied calmly. Get moving! Skylar snatched her pack and bolted for the back exit. The Reaper followed, silent as smoke. They barely made it to the alley before a plasma grenade detonated behind them, shattering glass and spraying debris across the narrow street. A squad of mercenaries in black armor rounded the corner, rifles raised. Skylar fired first, her shots striking the lead attacker in the chest. The Reaper moved faster, weaving between the others like a shadow. His blade flashed, and 2 more went down before the rest scattered. Skylar bolted down the alley with him at her side. You call this off the radar? She snapped between breaths. Varen must have tracked the ship, the Reaper said grimly. He's putting every hired gun in the sector on us now. They reached a narrow market street crowded with early morning traders. Skylar pushed through the crowd, tossing a credit chip to a nearby vendor for a spare jacket. She threw it on to cover her weapons while the Reaper kept close behind her. The crowd thinned as they reached the docking bay. We can't just keep running, Skylar said. We need to get ahead of this. Varen's not just chasing us, the Reaper replied. He's still going forward with his plan. The virus didn't wipe out everything. Holt's too smart to rely on just one backup. Skylar groaned. Perfect. So now we need to hit him again? It's worse than that, the Reaper said. He's planning to sell a working prototype of the Nexus key to an Outer Rim warlord, someone with enough power to destabilize entire systems. If that happens, the damage will be catastrophic. Skylar clenched her fists. She wanted to walk away, sell her gear, book passage to some forgotten moon, and let the galaxy sort itself out. But she couldn't shake the memory of Varen's smug voice over her comms, gloating about her imminent death. Holt had set her up. Skylar didn't let that slide. Where's the sale happening? She asked. The Star Forge, the Reaper said. Skylar's stomach sank. The Star Forge was a floating fortress, a sprawling, orbiting platform halfway between a black market trading hub and a pirate stronghold. Its security was legendary, and it was crawling with bounty hunters, smugglers, and arms dealers. You're joking, Skylar muttered. Nobody sneaks into the Star Forge. We're not sneaking, the Reaper said. We're crashing the party. The Star Forge's docking bay hummed with chaotic energy. Skylar stood at the edge of a merchant's platform, surveying the endless crowd of thieves, traders, and mercenaries moving in restless waves. The Reaper stood beside her, cloaked and masked as usual. We'll blend in with the crowd, he said. Holt's security will expect a frontal assault. We get close, sabotage the exchange, and get out before anyone realizes what's happened. Sounds simple, Skylar muttered. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. The Reaper ignored her sarcasm. Holt's contact is a warlord called Draxon Thorn. Dangerous, paranoid, and extremely well armed. If he gets the Nexus key, he'll use it to destabilize trade routes and hold planets hostage. We can't let that happen. Skylar exhaled slowly. She wasn't sure what annoyed her more, that the Reaper always seemed so certain or that he was usually right. They moved into the crowd, navigating through smoke-filled corridors and neon-lit market stalls. Holt's mercenaries were easy to spot, black body armor, earpieces flashing red, rifles strapped across their backs. They gathered near a heavily guarded vault at the far end of the station's main hall. That's where the trade's going down, the Reaper whispered. Skylar nodded and kept walking, careful not to draw attention. As they passed the cluster of merchants, she spotted someone familiar, her old contact, Jaren Dox, standing near the vault. He was talking to one of Holt's guards. "Trouble," Skylar muttered. "Dox knows me. If he spots us—" Too late. Dox's gaze locked onto hers, and his face twisted into a wicked grin. He tapped his comm and whispered something into his sleeve. "Time to move," the Reaper growled. They slipped into a narrow hallway leading toward the station's maintenance tunnels. Skylar pulled her pistol, heart racing. "Dox just sold us out," she muttered. "Doesn't matter," the Reaper said. "We can still—" The blast hit before he could finish. The ceiling above them erupted in flames as Holt's mercenaries stormed the hallway. Skylar staggered back, firing blindly to cover her retreat. "We need another route!" she shouted. "This way!" the Reaper barked, slashing open a side panel. He grabbed her arm and pulled her into a dark service tunnel. The metal walls were slick with condensation, and the air smelled of burnt wiring. "We won't make it to the vault," Skylar said. "Holt's already tightening the net." The Reaper stopped and turned to her. "Then we change the plan." Skylar blinked. "Change it how?" "We make the key worthless," the Reaper said. "If we can sabotage it directly, Draxon won't pay for it. Holt's entire plan will fall apart." "That's assuming we can even reach the key," Skylar pointed out. "We need to get closer." The Reaper's masked face tilted slightly. "I know someone who can help with that." Skylar didn't like where this was going. Minutes later, they were back in the main concourse, moving through the crowd. The Reaper led her to a seedy gambling den, a pit of noise, smoke, and cheap liquor. A large, tattooed man sat in the back corner, surrounded by empty glasses and a pile of data chips. "That's Taro Quinn," the Reaper muttered. "He's a former Nebula Corps engineer, designed half the Starforge's security systems." Skylar's eyebrows shot up. "And you trust him?" "Not remotely," the Reaper said. "But I trust his greed." They approached the table. Quinn's bloodshot eyes lifted as they approached, and he grinned wide. Well, he slurred. "Didn't expect to see you again." "We need access to the vault," the Reaper said flatly. Quinn laughed, then sipped his drink. "Sure. And I need to retire to a beach on Orion Prime. What's your offer?" Skylar dropped a credit chip onto the table, a generous sum. Quinn stared at it, his grin widening. "I can get you inside," Quinn said. "But if Holt's men see me—" "They won't," the Reaper said. "We'll handle Holt. You just get us close to the key." Quinn's smile faltered, but he reached for the credit chip. "Hope you know what you're doing," he muttered. Skylar didn't. Not really. But if this gamble failed, none of them would be walking out alive. The Starforge's vault loomed ahead, a hulking steel fortress flanked by towering security droids and Holt's heavily armed mercenaries. Skylar Voss kept her gaze low, her pulse racing as she walked beside Taro Quinn. The drunken engineer had cleaned himself up surprisingly well, his stained shirt tucked beneath a sleek black jacket, and his unsteady swagger replaced with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how far he could push his luck. The Reaper followed close behind them, his masked face unreadable. "Just stay calm," Quinn muttered under his breath. "I'll get us past the outer gate. The rest is on you." Skylar resisted the urge to tell him that calm wasn't really her style. She adjusted her belt, feeling the cold weight of her pistol resting against her hip. Everything about this mission felt too unpredictable, too unstable, the kind of job where even a small mistake would get them all killed. As they reached the vault entrance, a guard stepped forward. He was a broad-shouldered man with a face like a hammer, hard, flat, and dull. His armor bore Holt's insignia, a sleek crimson triangle etched across his chest. "Delivery," Quinn said, flashing a fake identification chip. "Tech supplies for the exchange." "I'm here to inspect the containment unit." The guard gave Quinn a hard stare. "No one's allowed in or out until the deal's finished." Quinn shrugged. "Sure, But if the containment system glitches while Draxon Thorne's inspecting the key, you think Holt's gonna care that you said no to a maintenance check? The guard's scowl deepened, but he stepped aside. 10 minutes, he growled. Quinn led them inside, and the vault's steel doors hissed shut behind them. The room was colder than Skylar expected, sterile, metallic walls lined with glowing security panels. In the center of the room, suspended in a transparent containment field, the Nexus key hovered like a trapped flame. Its core pulsed faintly, a rhythmic throb of crimson light that seemed to breathe in and out. There it is, Quinn whispered. I'd say good luck, but you're gonna need more than that. Skylar didn't respond. She moved quickly to the control terminal beside the containment field. The Reaper knelt beside her, pulling a compact device from his coat. It was a small disruptor module, sleek and black, designed to overload circuits without triggering alarms. If it worked, the Nexus key's core would destabilize, rendering it useless. If this goes wrong, Skylar muttered, we're dead. Then let's make sure it doesn't go wrong, the Reaper said. Skylar activated the console, fingers flying across the screen. The system resisted her, layers of encryption pushing back against her commands. Sweat beaded along her brow as warning symbols flashed across the monitor. Come on, she muttered. The Reaper tapped his disruptor into the control panel, and the screen flickered. The security feed cut out for just a second, but in that second, Skylar slipped past the last firewall. The containment field shivered, its glow dimming as the Nexus key's core sputtered. It's working, the Reaper said. Skylar exhaled in relief, but the moment was short-lived. The doors burst open, and Holt's mercenaries stormed in. Leading them was Varen Holt himself, tall, sharp-featured, and dressed in sleek armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. His thin smile stretched wide as he laid eyes on Skylar. I should have killed you when I had the chance, Holt sneered. Skylar's hand shot to her pistol, but Holt's men were faster. She and the Reaper were forced to raise their hands as a dozen rifles leveled on them. Quinn froze beside the console, hands trembling in surrender. You've been a persistent thorn in my side, Holt continued, stepping closer. But you're too late. Draxon Thorne is already on his way. I'll rebuild whatever you just sabotaged, and when the Warlord pays me, I'll own half this galaxy. You think Draxon's going to trust you? Skylar snapped. You're playing a game you can't win. I always win, Holt said coldly. Skylar's gaze flicked to the console. The disruptor was still active, faint sparks flickering along its surface. If she could trigger it again, the system might overload completely, but reaching it with a dozen guns pointed at her was suicide. You're not walking out of here with that key, the Reaper said quietly. Holt laughed. And you're in no position to stop me. You sure about that? Skylar growled. In one swift motion, she kicked the disruptor across the floor. Sparks exploded from the control panel as the Nexus key's core flared violently, arcs of crimson lightning crackling across the room. The containment field collapsed, and the Nexus key spiraled out of control, its energy twisting and distorting the air around it. The Reaper moved like a shadow, his blade flashing as he struck down two of Holt's men before they could fire. Skylar dove low, grabbing her pistol and squeezing off shots at the remaining guards. Chaos erupted as Holt's mercenaries stumbled back, blinded by the violent pulses of energy now swirling from the destabilized Nexus key. Move! The Reaper barked. Skylar bolted for the exit, dragging Quinn with her. The Reaper followed close behind, cutting down anyone who tried to block their path. Behind them, the Nexus key crackled louder, its unstable core threatening to explode. They made it into the outer corridor just as the blast tore through the vault. The shockwave hurled them forward, and Skylar hit the ground hard, her ears ringing. Smoke billowed from the wreckage as flames licked at the edges of the vault's shattered walls. You think that did it? Skylar coughed. The Reaper knelt beside her, breathing heavily. It's destroyed, he said. No one's getting that key now. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, Holt's remaining mercenaries regrouping. Skylar forced herself to her feet, grabbing Quinn by the collar. Time to go, she said. They bolted through the winding passages of the Starforge, ducking past fleeing merchants and panicked civilians. The station's internal alarms blared warnings of structural instability. Explosions rumbled in the distance, shaking the floors beneath their feet. By the time they reached the docking bay, Holt's men were nowhere in sight. Skylar didn't stop to wonder why. She dragged Quinn into a waiting shuttle and fired up the engines. The Reaper followed, securing the hatch just as the ship lurched into motion. From the cockpit, Skylar watched as the Starforge shrank into the distance. The damaged station flickered with fire and smoke, its once intimidating shape now a fading silhouette against the endless void. Quinn collapsed into the co-pilot's chair, still panting. "That," he said between breaths, "was the dumbest plan I've ever seen." Skylar grinned. "Yeah. But it worked." The Reaper stood silently behind them, staring at the distant flames. "It's over," Skylar said. "We won." The Reaper shook his head. "It's never over," he said quietly. "Holt's still out there. He's not done." Skylar knew he was right. Varen Holt was the kind of man who didn't take defeat lightly. But for now, she was alive, and that was enough. "Next time," Skylar muttered, "I'm charging triple." The silence in the cockpit stretched long after the ship had settled into the steady hum of hyperspace. Skylar Voss leaned back in her chair, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her muscles ached, her ribs throbbed from bruises she hadn't yet counted, and the faint taste of smoke still lingered on her tongue. The faint glow of distant stars flickered across her face, but her mind wasn't on the view. It was still in the wreckage of the Starforge, playing back every detail of the chaotic escape. She knew better than to believe it was over. Varen Holt wasn't the kind of man who faded quietly into defeat. He was patient, ruthless, and resourceful, and people like that didn't vanish just because their plans crumbled. He'd rebuild, regroup, and come back harder. Skylar had seen it before, and she wasn't about to underestimate him. The Reaper stood at the back of the cockpit, watching her in silence. His mask reflected the dim console lights, giving him the unsettling look of a ghost hovering just out of reach. Skylar knew he wouldn't speak unless she forced him to. For all his skill in combat, the man had a talent for saying nothing until the silence pushed everyone else to break first. "You think he's still alive, don't you?" Skylar asked, her voice low. The Reaper nodded once. "I know he is." Skylar exhaled sharply. "Of course you do." Quinn snorted from the co-pilot's chair. He had one boot propped on the console, nursing a bruised arm and a half-empty flask he produced from somewhere in his jacket. "You two worry too much," Quinn slurred. "That station's half rubble by now. Holt's probably floating in a burnout hallway, wondering what the hell happened." Skylar didn't laugh. "You don't know Holt." "I know enough," Quinn muttered, taking another sip. "You people, you act like he's some kind of immortal. He's just another power-hungry bastard who gambled too hard." The Reaper's voice cut in, low and cold. "You're wrong. Holt doesn't gamble. He calculates." Quinn's grin faltered. He shrugged, but there was less bravado behind it this time. "Whatever you say." Skylar turned back to the console, fingers tapping anxiously on her knee. The longer she sat still, the more her nerves twisted. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something she had missed. "We need to know where he's going next," she said. "The Nexus key's gone, but Holt's not just going to vanish." The Reaper moved closer, his voice quieter now. "I think I know where he's going." Skylar's gaze flicked up. "What do you mean?" "There's a second research facility," the Reaper said. "Smaller, off the radar. Holt had a team of engineers stationed there to work on backup systems in case the Starforge failed." "You're just telling me this now?" Skylar shot back. The Reaper's gaze hardened beneath his mask. "I didn't know if we'd survive the Starforge. There didn't seem much point in planning past that." Skylar shook her head. "Unbelievable. The facility is remote," the Reaper continued. "Hidden in the asteroid belt orbiting Vrexus 9. If Holt made it out, that's where he'll regroup." Skylar frowned. Vrexus 9 wasn't just remote, it was infamous. The asteroid belt that surrounded it was a chaotic labyrinth of frozen debris, dense and unpredictable. Few pilots risked it without advanced navigational systems. "If he's rebuilding the Nexus key," Skylar said slowly, "he won't just stop at selling it. He'll want revenge too. He'll come for us," the Reaper agreed. "Unless we stop him first." Skylar sighed, drumming her fingers on the console. "I hate this plan." "I never said you'd like it," the Reaper replied. The approach to Vrexus 9 was worse than Skylar expected. The asteroid belt was a swirling mess of rock and ice, tumbling unpredictably through the void. The ship's stabilizers groaned as Skylar wove through the shifting maze, narrowly dodging debris the size of buildings. "I can't believe anyone builds out here," Skylar muttered, gripping the controls tightly. "This place is a death trap." "That's exactly why Holt chose it," the Reaper said from behind her. "Most people wouldn't dare follow him this deep." "Well, I'm not most people," Skylar muttered. The hidden research facility emerged through the dust and ice like a blackened scar against the asteroid's jagged surface. It was smaller than she expected, a grim, blocky structure with faint orange lights glowing weakly in the darkness. The place looked abandoned, but Skylar wasn't foolish enough to believe it. "There's a landing bay on the far side," the Reaper said. "We'll go in quiet." Skylar set the ship down carefully, her eyes never leaving the dark structure ahead. The place felt wrong, cold and silent, yet still somehow alive. They moved through the shadowed corridors with weapons drawn, boots clicking softly against steel floors. The air was stale, metallic, and Skylar's pulse hammered against her ribs. "It's too quiet," she muttered. "If Holt's here, why isn't anyone?" The first shot hit the wall beside her head. Skylar dove for cover, firing blindly toward the figures emerging from the shadows. Holt's men, still alive, still armed, spilled into the corridor like a black tide. "Fall back!" the Reaper barked. Skylar sprinted down the corridor, weaving between flickering lights. Behind her, the Reaper moved like a shadow, his blade flashing as he cut down Holt's mercenaries one by one. They rounded a corner and found themselves at a massive steel door. "This must be the control room," the Reaper said. "Then open it," Skylar snapped. The Reaper jammed a device against the console, bypassing the locks with brutal efficiency. The door hissed open, revealing a dark room lined with glowing monitors. In the center of the room stood Varen Holt. Holt smiled as they entered. His armor was battered, his face bloodied, but his eyes still burned with sharp, calculating fury. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone," Holt said. "You're finished," Skylar shot back. Holt laughed softly. "You really think that?" He stepped aside, revealing a secondary control panel, one that still pulsed with the familiar glow of Nexus key data. "You didn't stop me," Holt sneered. "You just gave me a reason to start again." Skylar didn't hesitate. She fired twice, but Holt moved faster than she expected. He slammed his fist against the console, activating the sequence. The screens flared violently as the data surged. "Stop the upload!" the Reaper barked. Skylar lunged forward, emptying her pistol into the control panel. Sparks burst from the console, and the power grid overloaded. The screens flickered, then died in a cascade of smoke and static. "No!" Holt roared. The Reaper struck before Holt could recover. His blade caught Holt across the chest, driving him back against the console. Holt gasped, eyes wide with shock, then slid to the floor, motionless. For a long moment, no one spoke. The scent of burnt circuits filled the air, and faint sparks crackled from the ruined console. "It's over," Skylar said at last. The Reaper stood silently over Holt's body. His breathing was slow, measured, but there was no satisfaction in his stance. Only grim certainty.